right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 190 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. We are waiting on maybe Ian to join us. We usually have every other Friday, we usually have Christine Lynn joining us. She had a power outage, and we have put together a different show than was planned. We postponed that one until next week, Friday. We had originally had Indy Samarajiva joining us, but he canceled last minute. He's fasting. He is tired, and Leo Zhao from East Berlin was kind enough to jump on last minute. And we're also waiting for Ian, but Ian is vacationing in Crimea, and he is maybe having some internet issues. We hope he pops in anytime. But there is a lot going on, and Leo has been kind enough to spend his time with us. Our title for this morning's episode was War with Iran, a necessary step to defeat China. And I've been posting a lot, thinking a lot about, the different ways that, the two competing ideologies, liberalism and socialism, perceive what's going on with this upcoming war with Iran. And it really does seem like war with Iran is going to be kicking off. I mean, I said it last week to you. I said last week I expected it to start, and so I expect it to start this week, tonight, tomorrow morning early. I really see it starting to happen. I could be wrong.
Taco is always a possibility. I mean,
God willing.
Burrito,
Inshallah.
quesadilla, burrito, taco, always a possibility.
That would be great, but it just doesn't look like it. It looks like, he has definitely boxed himself into a corner, and how can he possibly, not do something with all the military hardware he's brought over? And then, the big question is, once he does something, how is Iran going to respond? Because they've promised to, not just take it on the chin and not really, respond harshly. Blocking the Straits of Hormuz, just decimating Israel, decimating the ability for these Gulf monarchies to, export oil. We will see. I think very soon. What was the? I got carried away and I forgot all the other points I was gonna make. Well, okay. So ideologically speaking, so when we look at what's going on, liberalism is premised on the idea that what's going on is we have a whole bunch of almost 200 individual sovereign nation states that exist within a an anarchic system, and they're all just trying to do the best, make the best rational choices and decisions for their state. And so within that framework, it's easy to perceive that what the U.S. is doing must has to result from, some kind of a government takeover by the state of Israel. Like how else are we supposed to explain within this paradigm of sovereign nation states pursuing their rational best interest that the U.S. is behaving like this, other than to imagine, we must have been, conquered. Our government must have been taken over by this little state of Israel. So that is how, liberal ideology, that is one way in which liberal ideology interprets these events. I say, as a socialist who understands the reality of oppositional class interest and class struggle, that what's going on is we have a Western empire, and that empire exists to further and pursue the interests of the Western oligarchy, the Western ownership class, the Western capitalist class. And so from that perspective, the idea of nation states isn't really that important, right? Because, nation states aren't sovereign. Nation states do not pursue the rational best interests of the citizens of those states. Nation states are vehicles. They are, tools for the oligarch class to, further their interests. And so, go ahead.
Bourgeois nation states do not serve the interests of their citizens. Proletarian nation states do serve the interests of their citizens. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, that's the distinction. That is the distinction that there is, between China and the United States, and then all the other um, socialist um, nations that are actually pursuing the interests of their citizens, in this, um, you know, constantly changing world where the material conditions are constantly changing, depending on what the Western oligarchs perceive to be their interests and the best strategy to pursue. The the socialist states have to respond to that and adapt to that. And so I think what we see now is, as is suggested in my title, is that we see, from the perspective of the oligarch class, the Western elites, the Western capitalist class that have this empire, what they see is, China as their primary rival. And so they're taking these necessary steps in order to, be successful in a future confrontation with China. So that's what's going on with Iran. And for those reasons, it's just two really distinct perspectives of what's going on. And I think, of course, the liberal perspective is nonsensical, and it detaches people from this objective reality of, a Western empire that is, pursuing a strategy of confrontation and defeat / containment of their, what they perceive as their global rival, which is China. So it's just interesting because by and large, the vast majority of commentators in the alternative media that I enjoy watching, that offer good criticisms of the United States and their policy both towards Russia and with regards to Israel, they're almost all from this liberal perspective. And you don't really have very many solid analysis on, from a Marxist perspective, really explaining what is going on and why. But
so many of them, actually, so many say that the tail is wagging the dog. So many say that Israel is controlling the U.S., which makes no sense whatsoever. Israel cannot exist even for 2 weeks without financial backing from the U.S. But I guess they would say that the APAC has total control of the U.S. government. This is nonsense. It's obvious nonsense, and it's obviously that Israel is a tool, very specific, with a specific purpose.
Max, who is what is Max's last name? Shoot, he's great. He does great work. He used to be with Norton, and then they split. He's part of the Gray Zone. Blumenthal.
Right. Blumenthal, yes.
So even Max Blumenthal, I was watching him last night, and it's he's, again, tremendous, but it's just from a liberal perspective. And he's like, Israel has just conquered, the United States government. And I just think that repeating that does a disservice to people who are really interested in knowing what's going on.
And it is the actual anti-Semitic perspective. It is actual anti-Jewish. But yeah, I suppose Max is a tremendous reporter, a tremendous journalist, investigative journalist with a backbone. But I suppose of him and Norton, Norton is the Marxist one, and Max is a little bit on the, yeah.
That probably resulted in their split, and anyway, that was a lot of drama. I had okay, so let's say we see a confrontation very quickly. Let's just kind of logically, walk through what might happen. It seems like Iran is a strong, very large country, like close to 100 million people, if not 100 million people. And they have an offensive missile capability that seems like they could just wreck, the entirety of, Israel and all the little Gulf dictatorships in the region. However, given time, the United States and Israel also possess offensive capability that can do the same to Iran. And part of me thinks that the United States might be happy with that happening. That they would be okay to just see, the entire region decimated, because if their primary objective is weakening of China and really overturning the global order that they have created, and creating a new global order, and putting them, hoping that new global order will put them in a better position that they're currently in vis-a-vis China. Are they willing to just see, to kind of sacrifice Israel, at least their prosperity as they currently enjoy it and know it, in order to really wreck Iran? And
Of course they would.
yeah. So I think that's the calculation that they've made. And I mean, they're hoping not to, like, they're hoping to be successful, but at the same time, they've calculated that there's a possibility that Israel just gets wrecked. And I think they're going to be okay with that. So ideally, of course, Iran doesn't get wrecked. Iran is a much vaster country. Israel is a tiny country. And ideally, Iran can do a lot more wrecking than they receive. But that's just what the unknown is, and that's the variable which we're going to watch play out, probably starting very soon, and it probably continuing perhaps for a month or months. Alternatively, maybe Trump will try very hard to come to some kind of agreement like he did the last time in the 12-day war, because he wants the pressure of the lobby off his back, right? He's not interested in crashing the global economy, and he will try and work behind the scenes, maybe to get Iran to stop and have another quick, tidy little war. That's what he would like to happen. But do you think that is possible? Do you think that's an option?
Yeah, sure, that is an option. I mean, what's not clear is, how the various global forces and the current geopolitical configuration will affect what we know as Marxists to be true, which is that the bourgeois oligarchy needs a war to reset the rate of profit, to reset the global capitalist system, which was what the world wars earlier 20th century was about, because capitalism had already collapsed in the 1920s. So today, there are a lot of different factors. There are a lot of different factors at play. The oligarchy does not want to rule over rubble. Total rubble.
Yeah.
We have nuclear weapons. We have a world that is pivoting away from Western hegemony. We have Western-led institutions becoming delegitimized very rapidly. So yeah, it's really a toss. It's really a gamble. It's just these hawks on Capitol Hill and versus the relative voices of reason, battling it out. Like literally, that's pretty unpredictable. I'm not sure if it's wise to make a bet on either one of those camps, which way this particular Iran confrontation will go.
A viewer made a good point about Max in Max's defense. I think it might be a good tactic and strategy to push this angle and this idea. Rather than try and change people's frameworks, which is nearly impossible to do, I know from experience. It might be more expedient, to speak within their own framework and turn them against the policy. So I get that, but personally, I can't help but try and explain the whole truth. I'm not the kind of person that's going to give you a a partial lie because I think that's going to be most effective at changing your opinion. I'm going to try and help you understand the big picture. So I mean, but you might be right. Like Max, might be calculating, and he might have, be smart to employ this strategy of, talking about how this is just ridiculous. Like, we're doing this for Israel, even though that's only like a little bit of a partial truth. So you brought up nuclear weapons, Leo. You said nuclear weapons, and so that's an interesting discussion because, I don't put it past Israel that if, in the coming conflict, they start getting the worst of it and they really start getting pummeled by Iran, that they wouldn't resort to that. But again, that's just speculation because, Iran could target Israel's nuclear facilities and cause nuclear fallout in Israel, even without using nuclear weapons. And even nuclear weapons used against Iran I guess they might have developed some tactical low yield nukes that wouldn't necessarily risk spreading fallout to Israel. But there's an argument to make that, Israel would use nuclear weapons against Iran. And then there's a counter argument that says, well, they would never do that because it would be self-destructive.
Did Russia supply Iran with Oreshniks and the other one? What is the other one? The Seabird.
I know the Kinzhal is the dagger.
Yeah, they have several ICBMs named after seabirds. Which one I'm looking? But anyway, the latest one, the one that goes very high into the stratosphere and then dives down, like the bird after which it is named.
Okay.
Dies in hunting. Like,
oh, that's interesting.
Anyway, did Russia supply Iran with those? I can't
That
remember.
is a good question. I don't think there's any definitive reporting on that or statements from either Iran or Russia. But I know that Iran has their own native domestic missile industry, and Mohammad Morandi did like a 30-minute, 45-minute documentary on their weapons program, and they have like 37 different types. And the newer generation that they didn't even use in the 12-day war. And he went through it. And so it's very state of the art. It's among the best in the world. And so I'm not sure. I'm not sure they need help from Russia, honestly, as with regards to their missile abilities and their domestic missile manufacturing. I mean, what they need help in is air defense. I did see reporting that they got like 1,700 man pads. Now, man pads are the U.S. version of the surface-to-air missiles that individuals can use themselves. And so they got some, I think, from Russia, and they're not called man pads. Russia has their own brand of that, personal operated surface-to-air missile that can be very dangerous. And so I heard that, there was reporting that Iran received 1,700 of those. That's going to be a nightmare, you would think, for, the West if they, are going to rely on the Air Force alone to regime change and balkanize Iran. And so that's definitely the objective. The Western objective is regime change, balkanization, and reducing it to a Libya, because I don't think they really think there's a chance of, actual regime change. They're just going to kind of destroy the society. But
and China has supplied a lot in air defense technology.
Yeah, satellite tracking, electronics jamming, electronic warfare, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting. But you try and think about the calculus of the United States, and I think, are they really going to be casualty averse, or are they going to hope there's some casualties and some planes getting shot down and some ships getting sunk in order to justify the larger kind of protracted war that would be necessary to actually achieve these objectives, regime change and balkanization. And so I'm thinking that, Israel might even initiate some kind of a false flag to ensure that there's a huge, high-profile, destruction of a ship or something like that, to be able to, you know, rally the United people, unite the United States people in support of a greater kind of war that you'd think is going to be necessary in order to achieve those goals that the entirety of the West really needs to happen if they're going to have any hope of confronting China, right? Because they have these grandiose plans of a future energy embargo against China, containing them, weakening them, isolating them. But it seems impossible when you think of you're going to isolate the person, the country that is the number one trading partner of more than like 150 of our 200 states in this country. It's like, how are you going to isolate them? They're the manufacturing, country of the world. They're the manufacturing hub of the world. And so, to me, I always argue that China won about 20 years ago. They put things in place, systems that are just going to, reproduce themselves in such a way that is uncontainable. And they've taken the steps to make themselves impregnable to military attack and economic coercion. And so there's really not any kind of a rational plan that could achieve victory and achieve China's containment. All you can do is, destroy everyone. But even then, I think, the way China has situated themselves, any effort to destroy them is just going to, blow back on the country doing it even worse. And that has been their plan, and that has been their strategy, and that is what they have accomplished. Like, they've put in place a situation where any attack against themselves is going to be more harmful to whoever is doing the attacking.
Yeah, so in many ways, that if the U.S. gets what it wants, a protracted war against Iran, I mean, that's will be the worst for empire. I think maybe we are worrying too much. Maybe that we should all just kind of relax and enjoy our Fridays. Because like, if you look at the real calculus, if the U.S. gets what it wants, it's probably going to collapse sooner, or like, like a protracted war against Iran would deplete its capacity, would deplete its resources for a future war against China. I mean, there's really, I mean, it, something like 40% of the U.S. naval capacity is needed to confront Iran properly, right? Something like that. I mean, but they need even more than that to keep it going, to to sustain a conflict against Iran. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just don't see it. I mean, of course, there are many commentators with much more in depth tactical, military information than me, than probably you as well. And I've been listening to a lot of analysts on the particular logistics and capacity in terms of yeah, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of military raw power, and it just seems really hopeless for empire. It just seems really on every level, and politically as well. I mean, like you said, Iran is not going to fold over. I mean, this is a country that has survived 70 years of U.S. regime change operations, color revolutions. Iran was the first one to suffer a regime change operation, right? 1956 or so.
Yeah.
Iran was the first one, of course, as masterminded by the
Grandson of Teddy Roosevelt.
yeah, but more so his advisors in the CIA, in the proto
Yeah.
CIA at that time. What's his name? Alan
Dulles, that guy.
Dulles. Yeah, I was gonna say Lomax. No, not the ethnomusicologist. Alan Dulles and his brother Alan. And what's his brother's name again?
Alan and shoot, John Foster,
No.
John Foster Dulles,
Yeah,
Alan
yeah, that's
Dulles,
right. That's
maybe.
John Foster Dulles. Yeah, 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 yeah. You know, it's funny here in Berlin. We have a cultural institution called the House of World Cultures. It was built by the Americans, by the U.S. Americans in the 1960s, as a kind of like virtue signaling, grand gesture of virtue signaling for West Germany. The House of World Cultures. It's a very impressive architecture, and this kind of liberal, multiculturalism, like this kind of like grand gesture. But I mean, they have some good music there. I've played there often, and increasingly in the last several years, it has been this African dude, this African expat art curator, has taken over as director, as a kind of token. But anyway, in the last few years, it has increasingly become a hub of the decolonial academia in the West, right? Or in West Germany, it's like a major cultural hub where they have a lot of events like decolonial conferences and speakers, authors. Like, they will never mention Ibrahim Traore even once, right? They will never ever mention what is happening, the real decolonization that's happening in West Africa. But anyway, I was reminded of this because this entire institution sits on a street called John Foster Dulles Boulevard. Anyone who's interested, you can just look at Google Maps and search for House of World Cultures. I mean, house spelled the German way, house, Haus, but it doesn't matter. You probably find it anyway. House of World Cultures in Berlin. And you will see that it sits on John Foster Dulles Boulevard. It's just insane. It's amazing. I mean, these are the guys. These are the architects of, destroying a socialism in the global South. These are the people that are the architects of continued sustained poverty and underdevelopment in Africa, in South America, in large parts of Asia. I mean, Alan and
Yeah.
John Dulles directly, they literally were instrumental in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba,
Yeah.
as well as, of course, all of the other
Probably
Allende,
hundreds of others. Yeah.
hundreds of others. But anyway, that's a little side note.
Well, and the whole anti what did you say it was? What you just anti
The decolonial academia, the
decolonial, right?
decolonial wokeademia.
So no, that is aimed directly at China because everybody knows that China is an imperialist and they need to give sovereignty to the various groups. The Uyghurs deserve their own country, and that's why China is a colonialist power. The Tibetans, of course,
Absolutely.
the Taiwanese, of course, deserve their own. So and then in Russia, it's also aimed at Russia for
Absolutely.
the exact same reasons. Uh, Everybody needs their own what you call
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
So
The decolonial wokeademia is the topic currently, Ian. And one of the first, shows the House of World Cultures put up was decolonizing Russia.
yeah, no,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And they had recruited some, ethnic minorities from the Russian Federation. This I know this one guy personally, a Boryat, from Moscow previously, an artist, who like wrote a lot of the program for that decolonizing Russia show. It's just a dumpster fire, man. This is a dumpster fire of how the Soviet Union like colonized these people, and they were just as bad as the British, and just as bad as the Dutch and the Belgians, like the
Oh,
Soviets. Oh my God, oh my
Prison
God, the
House of
Soviets.
Nations.
The
Yes.
what?
Prison House of Nations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, the
And
Soviets
it's
that designed their written scripts in order to preserve their languages during a incredibly desperate time of industrialization. Anyway,
yeah, no, they're creating a whole ideology that's leftish, but it's totally compatible with imperialism, and that's it's just totally to pursue the interests of Western imperialism is the whole point of all of that, under the guise of we're woke and we're anti-colonial and it's so obvious and pathetic. I
yeah, I was really
feel bad.
happy when
Go
Gabriel
ahead.
Rockhill mentioned that.
Yeah.
Gabriel Rockhill specifically said that the decolonial narrative is the latest permutation of the synthetic left of the entire anti-communist left agenda apparatus. But yeah, like I would like to do more work on that and of course it dovetails with that one woman. She's from California. She's Chinese American that has done a large body of work on dissecting the PMCs, the professional managerial class. What was her name again? Something Wong, I want to say. But anyway,
No,
she's great.
send me instant message me that info because I'm not even sure who you're describing, but they
Okay,
sound like I
she's
need to.
yeah, she's great. She's from California and she's doing a lot in dismantling the whole identity politics matrix, in taking it apart, in identifying the professional managerial class as like this, strata of intelligentsia, of cultural administrators, gatekeepers of lefty, progressive, multiculturalism and like all this liberal kind of progressive politics and identity politics. They're the gatekeepers of identity. They're the a friend of mine, an African American scholar, calls them the priests and priestesses of the neoliberal order that gatekeep the
Yeah,
identity pyramid hierarchy or like Olympics
it's a great
oppression
way
Olympics.
to understand liberalism is as the new religion of the day, and it serves the same functions as religion did in the feudal times. Maintaining the current order and keeping the ruling class in charge. Ian, what So okay, so we were hoping Indy was going to join us. Indy, he was tired and he was
Yeah,
fasting. And
that's I almost didn't make it myself. Because a certain person who I won't name, I'll just say he's a Trotskyist, was unclear about who the lineup is going to be tonight. But that's okay. I'm here. I saw I saw you were live on my own YouTube channel. Like, oh, that's of course I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be there. And so here I am. But yes,
Wait, who's the trot?
yeah, what are we talking about? Is he
I'm
insulting
insulted.
me?
No. But anyways, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so I did write a blog post on the whole Iran situation recently. I did do some research into it. So it's and the consensus seems to be that Trump put himself into this corner that he was assuming that the show of force would make Iran back down, and they didn't back down. So now he's stuck with this big show of force that he has to back down from. And you have two carriers. You have the Fords and the Lincoln. So the Lincoln, I guess, is in the Persian Gulf, and the Fords, the one with the toilets problems, is off the coast of Israel. And the consensus seems to be that one is playing offense and one is playing defense. So the Lincoln would be because it doesn't make sense for the Ford to do offensive because it's on the wrong coastline. It wouldn't make sense for the Fords to attack, but so it makes sense for the Lincoln to attack. And if the Lincoln attacks, what Ford can do is play defense. If they retaliate, specifically if they retaliate against Israel, the Ford is there to intercept those. So it's on one hand, it's unprecedented. I mean, the claim I saw, I didn't research it, but the claim going around is that that's not been done since World War II, something on that scale. We have the carriers actually split up between offense and defense. And it's also from a political standpoint, attacking Israel means necessity, even if they don't target U.S. bases, which they might do anyway. But even if they say, okay, we're just going to not target U.S. forces, so they don't have an excuse to do a full-scale war against us if Iran tries that. The problem is that they cannot strike Israel without engaging this carrier group, which Trump can turn around and say, look at the aggressive Iranians attacking our carrier group. We have to go to war with them, take the gloves off. So that's the most likely, from what I've read, the most likely reasoning behind that and why.
Yeah. So Israel will fire the first shot.
Not necessarily, but it is true that Israel seems very does not want to go up against Iran by itself without explicit U.S. support. Because I know the PR angle is that they won the 12-day war, you know, they get and all that, and there's no damage, but their actions seem to be they don't want a repeat of the 12-day war. Because why would they be so interested in U.S. if they can take care of Iran themselves? Why would they be so obsessed with U.S. support? Well, because of course they can't take on Iran by themselves.
I mean, yeah. So Israel obviously can't destroy Iran and needs Big Brother. I mean, that's a given. And then the United States. I think Trump would like Israel to strike first. That way, he can blame Israel. He can blame Netanyahu. You know, and he can defend what he's doing on the basis of defense. You know, I'm defending an ally against Iranian attack, and it doesn't really matter if Israel started it or not. The thing is, Trump didn't start it. You know, so everybody is going to support Trump defending Israel. Not everybody is going to support Trump attacking Iran, but that's why it's going to be great, optically, if Israel strikes first, and then, like you said, it's going to just automatically involve the U.S. But the U.S. can say, "I'm being dragged into it, and we have no choice," rather than, "Oh, I'm going to attack Iran because I choose to." I just think those optics are stupid, but for liberals, they're compelling, or for some liberals, they're going to be compelling.
I don't know who this is. Well, my personal problem is I don't know who this is supposed to be compelling for. I mean, yeah, there's this collective of people
Americans
who support Trump no matter what he does. But I don't look at the liberal media; they don't seem like ecstatic to go to war with Israel. Conservative media doesn't seem ecstatic to go to war with Israel either. The problem that Trump has here is that. Yes, if he pulls off something like he did in Venezuela, I mean, Venezuela was perfect because he did this big, high-profile. He snatched Maduro, no friendly casualties. It was a very clean and quick. I mean, a lot of us speculated on, how did you pull that off? Was this an inside job? How did you do something like that? Like it sounds like something out of a movie. How did you do that? And someone's commenting on my mic, and I apologize. I will look at that after the show. I don't know. No one told me until now. My mic.
It's not the best, but I can hear you. I can hear what you're saying.
It sounds a bit muffled.
But
no worries.
Yeah, but so
we can still understand you.
What did I say? Okay, so the issue is that if it goes sideways, we're talking planes being shot down, or I would say the worst case scenario, leaving out like escalating nuclear war or anything like that. Just locally, worst case scenario would be a carrier being severely damaged or sunk. That's literally a Pearl Harbor, because there's 3 to 5,000 people on a carrier, I think. Something in the thousands, definitely. So that's literally a Pearl Harbor level catastrophe. And
Yeah.
I don't, and I mean, it's to say, so it's a Pearl Harbor level catastrophe or 9/11 level catastrophe, but it's politically it's not because of something Trump started. He can't, be like Roosevelt or like Bush saying, "Oh, look, they attacked us unprovoked," blah blah blah. It's gonna be something Trump got everybody into. After results in huge loss of life, I mean, I think he gets. I mean, I think it's over for him. He gets impeached. I think it's catastrophe level. That's what's at risk, and it's not clear to me Trump understands that there's that risk. I think the military does understand, Pentagon does understand there's that risk, and they're trying to explain it to him, but he doesn't get it. I think that's what's happening right now.
Certainty, almost certainty.
Yeah, I mean the midterms. Like, what would cause Trump to do well in the midterms? I mean, he would have to, not crash the global economy, not allow any, not start another war. I mean, these things all sound like they're going to be awful for Trump. Maybe again, he might be hoping that he can take care of everything, win a victory, get his regime changed, balkanize Iran, be the big hero for November, and then I think he'd be good. But I just like the Pentagon's probably explaining that that's like about 1,000,000 chance of that happening. So we were, before you came on, we were speculating about what does happen if there's a major event and a U.S. ship gets sunk. Does that justify and does that allow the Western Empire to really get on a major war footing? And just justifying a much larger kind of force projection against Iran that they currently don't have. I mean, are they just hoping that to start something in order to get some casualties in order to justify a greater commitment, a greater military commitment, perhaps with Europe, to really go after Iran? I mean, that seems like a plausible thing. And again, you'd have to get all the media on board with that, and you'd have to silence, dissenters.
It's possible, but I find it extremely unlikely, and there's two reasons I find that unlikely. One, if you look at the 1991. By the way, I switched microphones. By the way, I hope that makes my audio better.
Yeah, it's a bit better.
Good. Okay. So, there's two reasons for that. One, if you look at the Iran, I mean, because Iran is stronger. I think even at the time, Iran was stronger, but it's definitely stronger now, more than 20 years later. But the closest comparison we have to Iran is Iraq in 1991 and Iraq again in 2003. Now, if you look at the forces, that were deployed against Iraq both times. I mean, you're looking at about 500,000 people. It was an international coalition, and the USA alone, if memory serves me right, both times was around almost 500,000 by itself, 400, 500,000 people. And I don't see either of those things happening for Trump, because Europe is all about Russia right now, but they don't like Trump. They don't like they don't like anything he's done in this term or his previous terms. I don't see Europe throwing themselves on their swords for Trump, especially after the Greenland controversy. They feel very, Europeans, they're all about their egos and their feelings, and he really hurts their feelings. So they're not going to jump onto a coalition with him. They're not. Even Starmer found his balls and said, we're not going to support. I mean, he might say one thing and do another thing, but at least he said he's not going to support.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I'm not finished. And domestically, if you look at the numbers for what the USA, not even talking about coalition partners, is what the USA sends. 40 to 50% of those people the USA sent in both of those initial invasions were reservists and National Guard. I mean, I don't think Trump has the domestic support to ask Congress to do a mobilization. And so I don't see it happening. Yeah, good.
When you
Leo,
say mobilization, are you talking about a draft or what?
I'm talking about sending letters to the National Guard and saying, hey, guess what? Your husband/father is going to Iran.
Okay. Mobilizing National Guard. I mean, my point is that if a carrier ends up at the bottom of the sea, I mean, nothing that we think of as normal now is going to be normal.
I mean, it all depends on who the anger is directed against. Roosevelt, he successfully he successfully pointed it against Japan because they spun it. I mean, it's not necessarily true, but they spun it as a unprovoked Japanese attack against the USA. Same with Bush; it was an unprovoked attack against the USA, and they successfully spun it that way. But I don't see Trump, especially because he doesn't have the main thing for Trump is he does not have the media on his side like he did, like Bush or Roosevelt did. I think they're going to hang him out to dry if he attacks Iran and screws it up.
Yeah, no, it depends on how it goes, right? Now, so by the way, Leo, I just muted you because that does reduce a lot of the stuff in the background. So everybody's saying that when I mute you, it sounds a lot better. So when you're ready to say something, let me know and I'll unmute you. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I mean, no, I hear what you're saying. So you made the point that right now, the mainstream media is a lot of it is anti-Trump. And if he screws it up, they're not going to come to his rescue. And that's absolutely true. But I mean, it's just an interesting dynamic because what they're really interested in is getting Iran out of the way and making Iran a non-obstacle for Western imperialism in Israel. And in that regard, there's overwhelming bipartisan support for that. The question is how to do it. And I think that the media can easily be tempted to really change their approach. Change the way that they, talk about things. If they think that, by approaching it a different way, they're going to help facilitate, the end of Iran as an obstacle to Western imperialism. And so, obviously, if Trump messes it up, what they'll do is they'll, try and get him replaced, and have a Democrat majority do the same thing, but. I think once an aircraft carrier or a ship sinks, I think that, all bets are off. It's like, it's going to be a totally different new normal. Just like when the towers went down, you didn't have the bipartisan bickering. There was no more, anti-war sentiment allowed on the TV. I mean, Scott Ritter got canceled. Donahue got knocked off the air. It's like the establishment just, rallies around itself and does what it needs to do to achieve their objectives. Let me see if there's any. I unmuted you, Leo, and I know there's a little bit of static in the background.
Yeah, because I realized my default microphone had switched from my external microphone to the laptop microphones. Just double check in the StreamYard settings, Leo, if you could, which microphone.
Is it because I was typing a little bit?
No, it's just this white noise. It's still there.
There's just
it's the fan. It's the fan is what it is. It's the fan on my computer. Because I'm not using my mic. Maybe I do this and it will be better. I mean, but I haven't much to say regarding the particular military, strategies and tactics and hardware and technology and things like that. Anyway, that's not my area of expertise. Is this a bit better?
I can still hear it. It's probably the fan, like you said.
Weird.
It probably is. And it's not debilitating. We've had a lot worse technical issues. So, yeah, try not to.
Wait, hold on. How is this? Is this better?
It didn't seem to change anything.
Really? Strange. Wait, hold on. Okay.
But yeah, I don't worry too much. And I want to go in a direction that I already went, and I want to hit home on this. We kind of talked a lot about it before Ian showed up, but so this latest comment kind of explains what I really think needs to be explained and understood a lot better. And when we're talking about the governments and policies of the West, we have to keep in mind that they are not dictated, they are not influenced by a national interest, by what you and I think of as a national interest, right? So there's this overarching, class interest. It's a global class interest that the Western elites, the Western capitalist class has, and that's what they're pursuing. And that explains things that liberals can't explain. Liberalism can't explain why nation states don't pursue their own rational national interest. So, why does Germany suicide itself? Why do they allow their pipelines to be destroyed by the U.S. and not say anything? Well, it's because, the elites that run that country and own it are loyal to the elites that run our country and own it. And so they're constantly pursuing these policies that, a liberal national framework, a liberal nationalistic perspective simply can't explain. And so, and when they try to explain it, it sounds like this. And Ian, let me know if you've heard this before. This is what it sounds like when the liberals try to explain what's going on. Here's how they do it. They say the United States is occupied by Israel. That's their explanation. So what do you think about that? I mean, it's an indictment. I'm indicting this perspective and saying it totally misses the actual reality of what's going on when you say something like that.
I think you're going to have more than one thing happening at the same time. So yeah, there's this class interest. I think that's true to an extent. However, you do have which I have said both on the show and I've written about several times, you have a very strange situation in the USA that it's there's a colonial, like every other commonwealth and former imperial country in the British Empire, it has colonial beginnings, as an Anglos showed up on this soil and conquered it and colonized it, eradicated the original populations that gave the USA a colonial start. I mean, I guess to some extent, every country, or maybe not every country, many countries do it. Like even Britain itself was colonized by Anglos and colonized by Anglo-Saxons and colonized by Normans and Vikings and so on. So, but that was a long time ago. It's 1,000 years ago. But it gave us this kind of I think it gave the USA right from the beginning kind of a distorted national identity, that colonialist beginning. And then you had these waves of these further waves of immigration afterwards. I think what's happened is you have competing interests, you have nations within a nation competing against each other. And so, like, for example, you have those Cubans, those poor Cuban refugees who showed up to the USA saying, oh, we fled, evil, bad communism. And these people are single issue voters. And a candidate on either side of the aisle, Democrat or Republican, is scared to death of angering the Cubans because they have enough votes in several different states, not just Florida. There's a couple others. I don't remember the full list, but there's like 2 or 3 other states that if the Cubans all voted as a bloc could make someone lose a presidential election if they were all pissed off at him. So that's why we still have this Cuban blockade, because both Democrats and Republicans are scared of the Cuban bloc. Poles, I'll bring up another. Poles in the Midwest, they, like the Cubans, have enough are single issue anti-Russian voters in the USA. They've always been anti-Russian since at least the 1950s. They were very anti-Stalin. They hated Stalin. They hated the Soviet Union, and that's how they always voted. And Clinton bombed Yugoslavia in large part because he wanted the Polish vote in the USA. It was one of his major domestic motivations for his, like, why should the USA give a shit about Yugoslavia or Serbia? Because you have a ton of Polacks in the USA, and they hate Russians. They hate Serbs because Serbs are almost the same thing as Russians. They're Southern Russians almost. I think with Israel, so I don't have to sit there and say, oh, it's the Jews, it's all the Jews. But at the same time, you kind of have to admit that, there's the Israel bloc, and they're strong enough that you don't really want to be that guy who's an anti-Semite, and, you wake up the next morning, you have the New York Times headline saying this person is an anti-Semite, he loves Hitler, and you have the New York Post and you have Fox News, all both left and right outlets saying that this person is a Nazi, is an anti-Semite, he hates Jews, he wants to personally throw them into ovens, which is what happens if you go against the bloc. I don't know what else to think about that.
So what you're saying more or less is some kind of inherent ethnic animosity between Serbs and Croats and between Western Europeans.
Well, the reason I brought up Poles and Cubans is because I don't want to say it's just Jews voting as a bloc. It's at least several different groups.
But ultimately, your explanation.
Your explanation is between West Europeans and Slavs, between Jews and Muslims.
You're saying that the policies and the behaviors of the United States is dictated by the government's efforts to capture votes and stay in power. And I just think if that was if that was true, like if they were really interested in capturing votes, I think things would be 1,000% different, and I would be happy with that.
I would say it's not it's not exactly votes. No, it's lobbying groups. So yeah, capturing votes is part of it, but it's these competing lobbying groups in Washington. So when I visited the first time I visited Armenia, I didn't really know much about Armenia or Armenians, but one of the first things that hit me like a ton of bricks when I got off the plane in Yerevan. I was wandering around Yerevan, which is their capital city in Armenia. Is how much money the USA was spending there. And you see, and they're not subtle about it. You go to, some memorial, or you go to the Armenian Genocide Museum, or, just any of these random archaeological sites, you'll see this was sponsored by the such and such NGO or the Armenian American blah, 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 whatever. So it's the same thing, no one really sits there and thinks about, no one sits there and claims that Armenians secretly control the USA, but there is an Armenian lobbying group in Washington. And, so I wouldn't say Armenians control the USA, but I would say when it comes to specific issues, I'm sure on those specific issues, they have a lot of influence on how the USA behaves. Because, how often do you think about Armenia? Probably, on a typical day, how often do you think about Armenia or Armenian issues?
No, very little.
Very little, right, exactly. So if someone is just pushing you, we have to do this in regards to Armenia, you're probably going to be like, okay, fine, I don't care that much about Armenia.
But
So if you have
I'm
this block,
I'm trying to contrast two different explanations, right? I'm trying to contrast your explanation. I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to, you know, understand it as best as you can explain it, and then contrast it with what I think is going on. And so when I hear you explaining things, I don't hear any thought about there's an empire, and they're trying to do things that benefit their imperialist interests, and they don't really care what the population thinks. So, for instance, Trump's only bipartisan standing ovation came when he talked about defeating Iran and making sure Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons or whatever. 85% of the people in recent polling oppose a war with Iran. And yet our supposed representative government, gave Trump his only bipartisan standing ovation on an issue that, 85% of people oppose. And so, again, to make sense of that from a liberal perspective, where our government ostensibly is just genuinely interested in pursuing a rational national interest, and yet they just disregard, what 85% of the people want. It begs the question about why. And I'm trying to understand your explanation, because my explanation is because they don't represent the people, they represent the oligarchy. And it's not a nationalistic oligarchy. It's a transnational Western oligarchy that is being represented by the governments in the West. And so, so to me, I mean, that's a very compelling and all explanatory explanation. And when I hear you go on about, the Cubans in Florida, as if there's not this class interest to destroy Cuba, as if there's not a class interest to control Armenia and use it against Russia, as if there's not a class interest to destroy Iran and use Israel as our 51st state against Iran. Like, it all makes sense. But when I hear a liberal explanation, it doesn't.
Well, so, I mean, you're not, so, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you on that. There's a transnational capital ownership class, consensus on what's good or bad. And I want to actually address specifically Bruce's comments. There's lobby groups are tiny compared to weapons manufacturers, big oil, and big farms. Well, that's true, but here's the thing about big oil, and big anything. Those corporations, they're very risk adverse. When Bush wanted to invade Iraq, the oil companies actually petitioned him to not invade Iraq. Same with Trump. Trump tried to get the oil companies to support invading Iran. They said, no, we don't stop invading people. They're very risk adverse, because if you're just an oil company, you don't want ISIS, you don't want all this shit. You want stability, because the oil industry is very fragile and vulnerable to instability. So these people don't want.
So relate that to
any point I made. You bring up empires, right? You're like, oh, well, I mean, look at the Roman Empire. If you look at like these famous battles in the Roman Empire, well, hey, how do they start? You have this raiding barbarian tribe that enters the Roman Empire's territories, burning villages, and taking people as slaves and all that stuff. And what happens? That tribe that's under attack petitions Rome. It's like, hey, we're getting our asses kicked by this invading tribe. You need to send your legions up here to fight for us, and if you don't, we're just gonna. I mean, we're just gonna not pay our taxes. I mean, we're getting our asses kicked. They're burning our crops. They're taking people's slaves. So, I think the mistake that people tend to make is see an empire as like this one-way street. It's just the imperial court just oppressing people, and it's not a two-way street. But there is a two-way street. The ruler and the ruler does have a two-way street. You do have lobby groups. You do have if anything, you have local oligarchy in these tribes that are ruled by Rome. The capitalist class in these ruled tribes who say,
Do you think the Western Empire that that exists now,
Mhm.
do you think it has interests and motives and a strategy to pursue those interests that it's motivated to pursue? And what do you think those might be?
Well, I mean, Netanyahu has visited. I mean, this was what, his seventh or eighth visit to Washington just since Trump took office. So clearly, I mean, you can. I mean, some people say, "Oh, Israel occupies USA." I wouldn't say it's that. I think that's too extreme a description. But I would say that there's this symbiotic, codependent relationship where the president of Israel can come to Washington and he's not just the president of some small country. I mean, do you think the president of whoever it is, the president of Serbia or the president of Armenia or, a comparable small country comes to Washington and is treated like, do you think they shut down the whole highway for, what's his name, president of Armenia, Pashinyan, how the hell you say his name? President of Indonesia, president of
Yeah,
any.
no, Israel is definitely thought of more well regarded than Indonesia and Armenia. I'm trying to get you to engage with the alternative framework that I'm putting forth. And
Well, people have more an innovate. Well, I mean, and this is the argument we've had before. That rich people are not like these automatrons who don't have emotions or personal loyalties or ideologies. I mean, I'm just telling you guys that's not true. I mean, you can be a billionaire or a trillionaire. You can still have your religion and your ethnic identity, and you can have these personal things that you feel very passionate.
Yeah, but the bourgeoisie are unified in their class interest, in their economic interest. They have their own whatever ideas,
As well.
personalities, but they are determined. I mean, this is where the economic determinism comes in. Like their position, their interest is to maximize profits and lower wages. I mean, that's the primary, right? That's the primary interest of the bourgeoisie that is very different
I mean, that's true,
from
but
that
we're
of the working
talking.
class. And in terms of geopolitics, they are also unified in a
yeah.
interest in preserving their class privilege and power.
Can we agree?
Well, let me
I
give
think
you
I
an
know
example. So,
me and
like
Leo can agree
Pakistan,
that
which is
there's an
a U.S.
inexorable
ally, and
the
India, which I wouldn't
the
quite.
Western elite.
But
There's
I
an
mean, would you
inexorable
say? Would you
Ian.
say?
So I'm trying to give you a definition of the class interest. So I think the Western ruling class is unified in an interest. It's an inexorable drive to control every government, resource, and market on the planet. That's what they want to do. That's their objective. That's their motivation, and they can't stop doing that. That's what Leo used the word determinative. It's inexorable. They can't stop. There's not the only thing that can stop them from pursuing total global hegemony is a force that they can't that stop is force. Like that's the only thing. So the Western oligarchy is united in their desire to control every government, resource, and market on the planet, and that's what they want. So they're united in that goal. They perceive certain obstacles, China, Russia, and Iran is kind of the lowest of the hanging fruit that will be a stepping stone towards that global. So, that's the materialist analysis. But yeah, I mean, so I want you to engage with that. And I mean, the idea that oil companies are risk averse, okay, but again, I just don't see that as actually dealing with the alternative perspective that I think really explains everything in a way that, liberalism it can't do. Liberalism just doesn't even see class. They don't even understand an empire. Like none of that makes sense because liberalism says, oh, we're all just sovereign nation states pursuing our own national interests. And with that perspective, it's impossible to understand what's going on. It's impossible. And what you end up doing is you come up with ideas like, well, this little state of Israel has captured the United States government. That's what happened. And that's, and I just think that's just so unsatisfactory and wrong. And it does a disservice to people who are actually interested in understanding why things are the way they are.
Well, I wouldn't call what I'm saying liberalism. I'm just saying there's. I mean, can you tell me with a straight face that Indian lobbyists in Washington, because there are Indian lobbyists in Washington, Indian lobbyists and Pakistani Paki lobbyists are saying the same thing, or are they in opposition to each other?
Okay, so I mean, again, there's all kinds of actual things that exist beneath the umbrella of imperialism and the interests of the Western elites. So the Western elites can definitely entertain lobbyists from India, but at a certain point, they're not going to. It's not all about, getting money from lobbyists. There's a bigger class interest and there's a bigger agenda than just profit. It's also control. So these are two things that go hand in hand. Leo mentioned profit, maximizing profit, but you can't do that unless you have total control of everything. So they want total control of everything. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah. First, you need to set up these incredibly uneven trade arrangements, right? That imperialism needs with its prey countries with in the
Vassal
global
states.
south, or victims of imperialist control. They need to set up these incredibly unfair trade deals with Africa. For like France buys like gold and oil from Burkina Faso for like 1/100th
Same with the uranium.
the normal market price, right? So they need to keep up these arrangements. But guys, I should go. It's not 7:30 yet. We still have 15 minutes, but I need to prepare some stuff because I don't want to be late for something.
No worries. Thank you for joining us, Leo. We'll continue this conversation in your absence until Ian relents that I'm correct and he's no.
Of course.
Thanks for joining us, Leo. We'll see you soon.
Talk to you guys later.
Take care. Okay, so I mean, I don't disagree with you. There's an overarching class interest. There's a transnational. I absolutely agree with you. There's a transnational interest. But I'm also saying there's conflict. There's local interests and there's national interests that conflict with each other, and that's why imperial policy can seem so schizophrenic, because to an extent it is schizophrenic, because you have conflicting or contradictory ideas happening at the same time, and that's why it's easy to look at what Trump is doing or Obama was doing. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, because to an extent it doesn't make sense, because you have it's like having 4 or 5 different people trying to drive a car. Imagine 4 or 5 different people in a car trying to grab at the steering wheel and drive the car where they want to go. It would look a lot like American policy.
Well, I think there's a continuity, though. I think, I think if we understand this overarching agenda and the overarching goal, that we can make sense of things and we can predict things too. Like, we can predict that war against Iran is inevitable. We can predict that quite possibly, they're willing to allow Israel to be significantly, destroyed because it's going to be worth the sacrifice to destroy Iran, because they have overarching global agendas and a global objective, which Iran is just a stepping stone to. But I think, again, you miss all of that, and you can't comprehend any of that.
I just don't think it's inevitable. I mean, it might. I mean, it's like, if I had to assign a probability of a war with Iran, I'd probably say 60 or 70%. I wouldn't say it's inevitable. And the reason why I don't say it's inevitable is because I understand there's competing interests. Because, the Israel lobby wants the USA to go to war right now. I think actually that's influencing how the Epstein files are being treated, because it's like I've noticed, like if you pay attention to how the Epstein case has been handled, Trump was, I mean, what's that woman's name? That woman who's in charge in the Justice Department, Bondi,
Oh yeah,
whatever her name, yeah, whatever her name is. She at one point actually denied they even existed. I remember that like 6 months ago. She's like, "Oh, there's no Epstein. I don't know what you're talking about. There's no Epstein files." Then there's that act of Congress, which was still heavily redacted, and people were pointing out how there were some points that seems to refer to Trump personally, and some people that's close to Trump that wouldn't necessarily want to be associated with that. A lot of that could probably be attributed to the Israel lobby using this pressure to try to force Trump to go to war against Iran. But the USA going to war with Iran would be, well, there's a terrible idea. So there's pushbacks like, we don't want to go to war with Iran. It's a terrible idea for the USA to go to war with Iran. But the Israel lobby is saying, no, you need to go to war with Iran. So there's these two factions. I would call them as the Israel first lobby against the realists, because the realist position is that it's a terrible idea to go to war with Iran. The best thing to do would be to even talk to Moscow and say, hey, negotiate a settlement with Iran. We will ease up on the sanctions, which is what Iran wants. Ease up on the sanctions, give them some of their frozen reserves back. Maybe they'll scale back their uranium enrichment program. Have some sort of concession so Trump doesn't look like an idiot. And then the aircraft carrier can go home and fix its toilets. There's no war. And yeah, so that's how I see it, because it's crazy to go to war with Iran right now. There's no.
So let me ask you about the realists, because you brought up the realist school, which is like John Mearsheimer, I think Jeffrey Sachs, and let me explain, why I call the realist school liberals, because again, the realist school is predicated on the idea that we have sovereign nation states. It's the framing that makes somebody ideological. Like, what is your ideological framing of things? So the realist school sees, almost 200, sovereign states all acting in an anarchic environment where there's no higher authority, that can dictate or control them. And so they all are pursuing their own national best interest in this chaotic environment. And that's liberalism, because again, and liberalism simply, the framework, the ideology of liberalism is impossible as a tool to understand different influences and different factors, namely the factor of oppositional class interests, empire, class struggle, or at least the realist school states that nationalism is more important than the class interest. And I think Marxism as a worldview that competes with liberalism says that the class is the fundamental influencing factor, and nationalism is a ideological construct that is used to further the interests of the class that controls the government. But so this, I mean, when you bring up the realist school, I mean, it kind of it doesn't it kind of enforces my point that I'm trying to make, with regards to which worldview makes the most sense if we're trying to understand things. And you get back to the lobby and you say, well, it's the lobby that's pushing this insane war with Iran. And I'm saying, no, it's not the lobby that's pushing this insane war with Iran. It's the entirety of the capitalist class pushing this war, because, they have this inexorable drive to have total global domination and to be the singular superpower throughout the rest of the 21st century. In other words, they want to take down, contain, and destroy, balkanize as much as they can Russia or China. And so I did like what this guy says here, Jace. So he's like, the entire capitalist class wants war with Iran. More specifically, the entire capitalist class wants total global hegemony, and they're all on board with this strategy to take Iran out in order to then, be able to better isolate and destroy Russia and China. Now the Dems, I agree with him. So the Dems, were hoping, and that's why we had the whole Russiagate thing to keep Trump out of office, because they were hoping that Hillary was going to initiate this war with Russia a long time ago, back in 2014, before, or at least 2016, right? So if Hillary Clinton would have won the election, she would have pursued an actual confrontation with Russia. She would have, they had hoped, right, either regime change Russia or significantly weaken them and crush them with crippling economic sanctions. And then that would have isolated China, right? That didn't happen, and then Trump has always been pursuing this policy, not of destroying Russia, not of, collapsing Russia, but of peeling Russia away from China and making them an ally with us, and working with us to isolate China. So that's kind of always been Trump's, that's why he's taken up so much political heat for saying these things like, hey, wouldn't it be great just to be friends with Russia, right? Like he's been saying that consistently for a long time. And that's because, he's kind of embraced this alternative strategy for global domination, but the strategy is to befriend Russia as opposed to destroy Russia. And the Dems have always been destroying Russia. Anyway, I'm sorry for the long-winded lecturing, but, I agree that with Jace, that's kind of the difference. There's a difference in strategy within the ruling class, but the objectives are the same. The objectives are the same. Sometimes they argue and fight against the best strategy to pursue it. And they obviously argue and fight over who gets to, be pushing the buttons and actually be holding the offices. But they're both on the same side with regards to the overarching objective of global domination, destroying Iran, destroying Russia, destroying China. And so, in that regard, I just, I don't think it makes much sense at all to talk about, the United States being captured by an Israel lobby. Like that just, it doesn't make sense, But my lecturing has probably caused you to freeze a little bit. You're going in and out of freezing. Yeah. So I do not want to monopolize any more than I already have, Ian. I don't want to lecture, but are you able to say anything? I know you're in Crimea, and no, it's not brain freeze. Okay, there, I see you now. Are you able to say anything, Ian?
I'm back. Yeah.
So we were planning on wrapping around an hour and a half anyway. We're about an hour and 24 minutes in, but we might need to cut it because I'm not very good at monologuing. I mean, I say that and then I monologue with guests around, and I probably could monologue, but I don't feel anybody really wants to hear my monologue. And so we might wrap up.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear. I heard that.
We are actually under drone attack right now. I think that's why my internet is falling apart. Because those of you who don't know, I am in Crimea. And we do have drone attacks several times a week. And Maria just told me there's a drone attack right now. So that might be why my internet's falling apart. So I apologize. But yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, we heard. So that's interesting. And I know in Crimea, you often have a troubled internet connection as it is. And then with the drone attack, I'm sure it gets a lot worse. And so, yeah, but you are spotty. You come in and out. We definitely hope that you stay safe. So, yeah, I mean, I like what Bruce is saying because he's saying their objectives are not, didn't say their objectives are capitalism. And by capitalism, I assume Bruce means just the pursuit of, the private ownership of the means of production. Yeah, it's way more than that. And they'll often violate their interests to, own the means of production by, by control. So they'd rather have control than just allow anarchy, right? And so they will definitely curtail the anarchy of the marketplace in order to have more full control. So Ian, yeah, it's tough. I'm so sorry with the spotty internet and and each time I try and break to give you a word in edgewise, you seem to freeze. So Ian is a suburbanite, a Moscow suburbanite, but he has a summer villa in Crimea, which he goes to visit when the weather gets bad in Moscow. So somebody asked me, that was what David K asked.
Well, I think this time we are going to be with this time. This time we are going to be, so this time we're going to be here, I think, all year because we brought the pets this time. We brought the cat and the dog to Crimea. We're planning this year just to stay for most or all of the year, I think is what we're going to do. So the internet goes to hell like it is now, so I apologize.
So your DACA is
usually I can get away with it when there's a panel because I do. Yeah, so we have
okay, Ian, what I'm going to do, I'm going to plug your I'm going to plug your website and then tell everybody to do their Amazon purchases through it. But then we're going to end the stream because it's difficult. Yeah, with just two people and the spotty internet. So go to readingjunkie.com. That's Ian's blog. And then there is a link on that. If you do any Amazon shopping, he will get a percentage of Bezos' profits. Bezos is a really nice guy, and he will give Ian some of those profits if you do your purchases through Ian's link to Amazon on his blog at readingjunkie.com.
We also have weekly updates from a biography of Stalin I am translating from Russian. So I'm going to have another update from that book probably tomorrow. So yes.
So Ian purchased like a 1947 book on a biography of Stalin that I'm not sure has ever been translated into English. Maybe it has been, but it's a contemporary biography and which gives it some merit and some use value. And it might not have been translated into English. So Ian is going chapter by chapter, giving us his own translation. So it's really good. I've read the first 2 chapters. There's, what is it, like 10 chapters, Ian? Okay. Yeah, we can't hear you. So yeah, let's check out readingjunkie.com. We will be back Tuesday, probably, to talk about the big war in Iran and how it's going, how Israel's faring, because I really expect that to kick off soon. Of course, I said the same thing last week, so take that with a grain of salt. Ian, any last words while you still have... I can see that you're not frozen. It's awful. It's awful. Okay. I'm gonna stream. Thank you guys. We will see you next week.